Happy Friday mga katribu and welcome to another episode of Kalingang KaTribu Legal Diaries. I am Venice Bautista and today we are joined by Adanas Cruz, Arella Parker, and Faustino Law Offices, Associate Lawyer, Attorney Alfred Campañano. Good afternoon, Attorney.
Yes, good afternoon.
Hello, ayan. So, ilang araw na lang at election na. 3 days, 3 days. Are you excited, Attorney?
Oh, well, we'll see.
Ayun, so dahil nga malapit ng election, let's just review some elections prohibitions for this episode. So, we will have a change of format sa episode na to. Bale, tatanungin lang kita kung we were gonna state a few election offenses or mga acts of prohibited, Tapos, you're just gonna tell us if you know how grave it is, may sanctions ba ito, or maybe just help us like clarify a little bit about them. Ayan.
Is Venice, no? The greatest election offense is voting for people who are wrong in office.
Yes, I agree with you, Attorney, but let's not dwell on that. Pero that is true, mga katribu. Kaya talagang vote wisely, ika nga, diba? Okay, let's start. So, let's start with something common and alam ng mga tao, no? So, yung vote buying or selling. Are we only talking about money here, Attorney?
No. The answer there is no. Under Section 261 of the Omnibus Election Code, this talks about vote buying and selling is hindi necessarily in cash ang consideration for that. So it can even be by property or any kind of promises, etc. So it's not necessarily cash as long as there is a consideration na binibigay sa'yo para i-vote mo ang isang tao.
I see. So, yung ganito po ba punishable by law?
Yes. It is punishable by law. So, makikita mo dyan na under Section 261 as well. Makikita mo dun kung ano yung mga degrees of participation. And of course, depending on the gravity, penalties will vary depending on ano yung nahuli, how much ang consideration, and how rampant it is, etc.
Kahit po ba yung nag-accept ng money or whatever price nito, makakasuhan din siya or you like the other party lang?
It is even the person who accepts that benefit. So, ang idea niyan is, syempre, it's the penalty the prohibited act is vote buying and vote selling. So, it's always a two-way transaction or more than, of course, two-way transaction. It's the buyer and the seller. So, under the same law, the same Omnibus Election Code would dictate that even the person who accepted that will also be liable for that election offense.
There we go. Okay, so what about conspiracy to bribe voters naman? Medyo hindi lang clear para sa akin, Attorney, like yung difference nito when it comes to the first one, yung vote buying or selling.
Ideally, parang mag-refresher lang tayo ng konti dito on criminal law, no? Conspiracy to do a specific act generally is not a criminal act. Kasi nga, remember, ang pinaka-point natin dyan is you punish only acts or overt acts that will result to a specific offense. The exception under criminal law is if the law in itself punishes the act of conspiracy or conspiring to do a specific act. So to answer your question, yes, even the conspiracy to bribe voters is punished by is a criminal offense as dictated under Section 261 subsection B of the Omnibus Election Code.
I see. So what are the sanctions for this? Medyo mas mabigat po ba to than vote buying or selling?
Well, actually, kung titignan mo, the act of conspiracy is often a lighter offense than the actual offense, than the actual act of bribery.
Okay.
So, expected yan na mas mababa ito as opposed to the offense of actually bribing someone. So, ganito yan eh. Pag sabi mong conspiracy to bribe voters, parang the fact pa lang na nag-uusap tayo, we are planning on how to, for example, solicit the business, no? Or kung paano tayo, magdo-door to door ba tayo para bumili ng photo, paano na, how much. So even that kind of, yun pag-meeting alone, to plan on how to bribe voters is the offense itself, is an offense in itself. So it's lighter than the actual offense of bribing a voter, but there is a separate penalty if you're found to even be planning to bribe voters.
I see. So kapag na-bribe yung voters, will they also be held accountable for that?
Yes. Again, no, kasi nga the persons who are liable for this one is, yun nga, the person is either principals, accomplices, or accessories defined under the revised penal code. Ayan yung sinasabi ko kanina that there are degrees of participation when it comes to the criminal offense. So in this case, the act of conspiracy is, yes, they are going to be held liable even if hindi sila nakapag-bribe ng voters. Because as I said, the law itself defines that even to conspire to bribe voters is an offense in and of itself.
I see. Okay. So, follow-up question lang, curious lang ako, naisip ko lang siya. Like, for example, yun talagang when it comes to dun sa vote buying, like those really unfortunate people, talagang vulnerable sectors, no? May parang leeway ba or, pampagaan ng kaso nito pagdating sa kanila?
I don't think so, no? Because the law does not really distinguish whatever intent or whatever circumstances surrounding why you committed an act. Baka siguro there are certain mitigating circumstances but of course, pag sinabi mong mitigating circumstances, that would only, lighten the penalty, but it will not excuse that person from criminal prosecution or criminal liability should they be found to have committed an election offense.
Okay, so kahit attorney sabihin natin yung parang pumutok na issue before yung sinabi ng isang candidate na kung mahirap ka talaga, accept mo na lang. Pero iboto mo yung kung sino man yung gusto mong iboto.
Supporter ako niyan, no? Pero when I heard that, actually, that's one of the articles that I wrote here in the Daily Tribune. I am a supporter of this president. However, mali yun eh. On a principle level, it really is wrong. But again, who's perfect, right?
Yes.
So, ang point yan is, in those kinds of situations, the law, we have to understand that, as I think nagkaroon na rin tayo ng segment on election before eh, na basically your vote is your political currency. This is your way to say, or this is way to at least determine on how leadership or how government will be done, or how administrations, how governance rather will be done in the next coming years. So it's I understand the practical consideration of that statement, and or often than natin kasi there's really difficulty in prosecuting this kind of offense.
Yes.
Kaya parang understandably so, no? Parang medyo may mga iba pa baka emboldened to do this because hindi naman kasi nahahabol. But again, it should always be a matter of principle for everyone that you should not be selling nor buying the votes of these individuals. Because basically, parang ang idea niyan is, if you do so, it is as if parang binenta mo na yung prinsipyo mo eh. Because when you vote, diba? When you vote, it is an expression of what kind of policies, what kind of government you want in the next succeeding in the succeeding years. So it's not something that should be taken lightly.
And yes, attorney, talagang
ganyan, hindi
talagang
naman.
damang-dama ko yung
Yes, gano'n na yung frustration ko pag nakikilala ko yan. Gano'n na pag ko sa article ko sa Daily.
Nagpa-pass through the screen itong frustration ni attorney. Okay, so next question, attorney, what happens naman if you wager upon the result of the election?
It is likewise, I think, an election offense. Kasi similar to betting, para it's really prohibited, no? Yun lang talaga. I have nothing much to say on betting or wagering on the elections. Kasi para technically, parang private naman supposedly yan kung iisipin mo. Parang kayo, pustahan lang kayo dyan. But again, I think the rationale behind why even wagering on wagering on election result is prohibited is because somehow it cheapens the election process. Remember, this is the height of democracy. This is the height of the expression of democracy. So I don't think it should be cheapened na para ka nagsasabong lang. Diba?
Totoo.
So I think that's the reason why it is an election offense.
Attorney, sometimes I parang wonder, how do these people who wager, parang sila nahuhuli, tsaka like, kailangan may enough proof para maging liable sila dito criminally?
Yes. Again, yun din Kaya parang, there are certain political offenses na nagkukulang talaga on implementation or how you operate in catching these individuals. So pareho tayo dyan, no, Miss Venice, no? Pareho tayo at an on how these people will be caught, because as much as alam natin, for example, na siya ay na nagko-commit ng ganyang election offense, we cannot dispense with the constitutional presumptions naman kapag nagpo-prosecute ka na.
Yes.
So, parang, di ba, the criticisms are the same. Kahit alam mong drug dealer yan or drug addict yan, there has to be enough evidence to prosecute him. Because again, the beautiful statement there is, the constitutional presumption is parang the cost analysis there is, it's better nga daw to let one man free. I forgot maganda yung word na yun. Pero parang sinasabi niya is, mas maganda pa na makawala na lang ang isang kriminal kaysa naman magkulong ka ng 10 taong inosente naman pala. So, again, circling back to what we're saying, it is indeed an election offense. And if you're caught, the challenge there is how much evidence can you secure in that span of time in order to criminally prosecute these individuals.
I see. What if attorney, for example, kunwari ako, nag-wager ako, and then it's just through messaging app. That's my screenshots. Would the person na nagsumbong be liable na parang, oh, that's invasion of privacy, ganyan?
I don't think so. Because, remember, as far as privacy is concerned, that is, of course, lesser than the reporting a crime. Parang the analogy is simple din Parang kunwari, pinatay ko yung nasa tabi kong cubicle. Tapos ang nangyari it happened in a private space and someone saw that act. Hindi ko naman pwede sabihin, hindi mo pwede ako isumbong kasi that happened inside my house or that happened inside my own office. Diba? Parang ganyan. So I think there's no issue if you're going to be a whistleblower. In fact, it's encouraged kasi this is one way for these offenses to be actually prosecuted. Kasi nga, di ba, these are mostly private transactions.
Yes.
So, hindi ka naman basta-basta na lang makakakita ng nagsusugal dyan na parang kumukuha ng parang sino mananalo, ganyan, right?
Yeah.
So, it's of sino ba yung who's willing to step forward and say that there is an offense and it needs to stop.
Very good. There you go, mga katribu. We encourage you to be a whistleblower. Just do it for our country. Yan. So, for this question naman, attorney, is coercion of subordinates punishable?
Yes. Again, remember, the idea of voting is an expression. It's a statement. So, this should not be curtailed or this should not be repressed as much as possible. So, to coerce someone to do something beyond his will is also obviously wrong. So, coercion, as defined under the Omnibus, as provided for under the Omnibus Election Code, is likewise a punishable offense under 261 subsection D of the Omnibus Election Code.
There, okay. Yan, malinaw tayo dyan, mga katribu, ha? So, we'll know more about the Omnibus Election Code of the Philippines when Legal Diaries returns. We'll be back.
Hulaton nato ang kabuntagon. Pahuway damgo ang ikaliway. Moro di hapon ang
Nasa ating pagkakaisa ang pag-asa ng ating bayan. Sama-sama tayong pabangon muli.
Aming pinahirapan ng mga sundalong Hapon. Si Harry Roque, pinaglabang kami.
Sa mga walang boses sa lipunan, si Harry Roque ang spokesman ng bayan. Attorney Harry Roque sa Senado, number 54 sa balota.
Ang asawa ko po ay kameraman na kasama sa lapas lang sa Maguindanao Massacre. Si Atty. Harry Roque. Hindi po niya kami nakakalimutan.
Sa mga walang boses sa lipunan, si Harry Roque ang spokesman ng bayan. Attorney Harry Roque sa Senado, number 54 sa balota.
Mapalutong bahay man o sumptuous meal for special occasions, sagot na kayo ng tropang Kalanpag. Dahil atid sa inyo ng Daily Tribune ang fun and exciting cooking show na Kalanpag, manood at matuto kung paano lutuin ang mga favorite nyong recipes. Sabayan pa ng fun and inspiring na kwentuhan sa kusina. I-upgrade na rin natin ang mga nakasanayang traditional dish ng pamilya. Plus, healthy tipid tips na ibabahagi ng tropang Kalanpag. Matuto, mabusog at good vibes dito lang sa Kalanpag tuwing Lunes, 10:30 AM sa Daily Tribune Facebook page at Tribune Now on YouTube.
Welcome back to Kalingang KaTribu Legal Diaries. So we are still with Attorney Alfred, and we were talking about the election offenses to know what we should avoid and for us to be the steward of a peaceful and orderly election. Ayan, so let's continue, Attorney. So before the break, we were talking about the coercion of subordinates, right? And then, so now I want to ask, what about the threatening naman or intimidation, or when it comes a little violent? What kinds of coercion kaya can result for one being in jail? Or meron bang ganun?
Let's see. That's ano yung wording sa Section 261. No? Threats, under Section 261E, it says, threats, intimidation, terrorism, any person who directly or indirectly threatens, no, to compel the registration, refraining from registering, but okay. So, under the same law, this is considered as an election offense. So, as far as the question of what kind of threats or what kind of intimidation, it can be either direct, meaning physical, whether emotional, any form of intimidation, because the law does not distinguish. As long as there is force or there is a harm being a threat of a harm being inflicted on the person, whether sa kanya directly, sa kanyang property, or sa kanyang family relatives, with the condition to with the condition to do a specific act, whether na parang kinocompel ka na mag-register ng vote. Parang I'll remove you from work if hindi ka mag-vote. I will remove you from work if hindi mo siya binote, or I will remove you from from work if you do not campaign, or I will fire you if you actually campaign. But so parang yun yung parang equation dyan. Regardless of what kind of threat.
I see. So, is this, parang there can be a jail time for this or like a fine?
Both. Ang naalala ko dyan. Hindi ko kasi kabisado, no?
Yeah.
Admittedly, as a lawyer, hindi ko naman kinakabisado penalty. I leave it up to the judge.
Yes. Pero grabe, no, talagang at least may jail time talaga for these people. Kasi when it comes to intimidation or threatening with, some kind of talagang devastating effect for the other person, they have to be liable for that. Okay, exactly. So what can happen naman po if you use coercion on election officials and then the employees as well? And what happens to them if they abide by it? Because they're scared, diba?
Obviously, if they do a specific, the question is, you coerce an individual to
like what if you coerce an election official talaga or employee, like what?
Yeah, in connection sa kanilang right to vote. Actually, mas malala pa yan kapag public official. And mas mabigat pa ang offense if the threat or the coercion actually came from the public official. So, yun lang naman yung answer dyan.
But what about for yung na-coerce nga, na parang kailangan niya, or na-abide, like, they followed this kasi nga they're scared to, mawala ng trabaho or yung threatens, ganon.
I think, of course, obviously, if the participation is forced, like for example, I think ito ata yung situation that you're thinking Di ba vote buying and selling is an election offense. Kasi ang nangyari I have a moral ascendancy or an authority over someone. And then ang nangyari inutusan ko siya to do this.
Yes.
Sell or to buy votes. Then obviously this is a justifiable circumstance on the part of the person who actually, let's say, solicited the business of buying votes. Because obviously hindi naman niya yan talaga, there is the absence of the willingness to do an act. Kasi under criminal law, obviously except what we call criminal negligence, normally criminal offenses has a very important element kahit ano pang offense yan, which is the intent to commit a specific offense or the intent to commit a specific crime. So in that sense, kaya justifiable circumstance yon yung fact na pine-pressure or kino-coerce mo to do an offense.
Okay, there you go.
On the part of the person who was pressured. But in that case, yung taong nagpe-pressure ang magiging liable. Kasi that is his will and that is his intention. At wala yung the person who's being coerced or threatened does not have the intent to commit the offense in the first place.
Ayan, malinaw na malinaw. Okay, so no naman, appointing the employees or giving promotions aren't allowed during the or after the elections rather. So like a month or so, I think. So pag ganun
45,
po,
30, depending on the if this is a regular election.
mm,
Pag sabi mo regular election, hindi yan yung parang national or local.
mm,
Pag sabi mo regular election, yan yung whether it's national or local, regardless, rather, it's a regular election if yan yung schedule talaga na mapapalitan. Like for example, the election on May 9 is a regular election. Kasi naturally, our president right now will have to step down. And that will cause a vacancy and kinakailangan yan ma-fill out or ma-fill in yung position. But assuming that nag-resign or other causes nawala na other causes na hindi na siya yung presidente, then the vacancy is caused by exigent circumstances, then special elections will have to be held. So in those scenarios, yun ang so yun yung difference rather between regular and special election. Why am I discussing that? Because to answer your question, depending yung scope or yung period to prohibit appointment of new employees, promotions, etc., they are not allowed. The window is, if it is before the regular elections, then that's 45 days. If it's special elections, then that's 30 days.
I see. So this ano pong scope nito when it comes to like the not being allowed to appoint or promote employees? Does it only apply to government agencies and government controlled establishments?
Yes. GOCC, a national instrumentality or a government agency. So yan yung scope niyan. Obviously sa private sa private sector hindi yan nag-a-apply. So pwede ka ma-promote kunwari, hopefully, for example, ikaw ma'am, diba, baka pwede ka i-promote ni Daily Tribune. Pwede ka niya i-promote tomorrow kung gusto niya because that's not cover. I think the rationale behind this prohibition is obviously ayaw nating gawin yan of those people yung mga taong may power to do so, yung appointing power, or those people who can give these promotions or additional benefits. We don't want them to use that power directly or indirectly to show na sige ipopromote kita kasi parang nagpapabango ka. Diba? Parang ganyan. Yan yung pinaka-point kung bakit yan bawal.
Okay. So, what about naman, attorney, when it comes to the prohibition against dismissal of employees? What if yun nga na-threaten sila, right? And then, saan sila pwedeng tumakbo? Itong mga employees na to. Kayo sila pwedeng magsumbong, tumakbo, ask for help?
Well, that would depend on what you want to get out of of what happened. If you want reinstatement, then if you're a government employee, you go to CSC. If you're private, then you go to the DOLE. Kasi that's basically not a ground for termination of employment, no? But if you want to prosecute at gusto mong makulong yung taong gumagawa na yan, then obviously you file the necessary complaint with the prosecutor because with the Department of Justice, sa city prosecutor particularly. Kasi yan yung magpo-prosecute ng offense.
Okay, there we go. So maraming salamat, attorney, for educating us on these few election offenses. At alam natin marami pang iba, pero ito lang yung kaya natin ngayon. And so before we let you go, would you like to say anything to our dear KaTribu viewers? Reminders for the election or kahit ano?
Well, I suppose vote wisely. Wala rin talaga yan, no? You still have time. You still have time. Actually, even on the May 9, bago ka pumunta sa precinct, you still have time. No? You look at the people you want to look at not just the qualifications. You want to look at the effects. What are his or her platform? And you always have to imagine na pag siya ba ang pinili ko and siya ang nanalo, what is it gonna be like? So remember, tayong kasabihan, you made your bed, you must lie on it.
Yes.
Right? So whatever happens after May 9, and obviously pag nagkaroon na tayo na elect na natin and they sit already in their seats of power,
Mhm.
you have to live with it, di ba? So vote wisely.
For 6 years, mga katribu.
6 years. For 6 years. It's a very, very long time.
Yes, correct, attorney. So thank you so much once again, Attorney Alfred. We learned so much na naman from you. And I hope na hindi ka magsawa sa share ng mga explanations, ng insights nyo. Ayan. And also, thank you to our KaTribu viewers for joining another informative and educating episode of Kalingang KaTribu Legal Diaries. You can watch us live on Daily Tribune's official Facebook page and also on Tribune Now on YouTube. Once again, I am Venice Bautista. Magandang hapon sa inyo. Happy weekend and vote wisely.
masipag. Yan po ang Pilipinas sa unit team na pagkakaisa.
PG Party List, kasangga mo, balot 108 iboto. PG Party List, boses natin sa Kongreso. PG Party List, kasangga mo, balot 108 iboto. PG Party List, basic good. Atin to, pagkaisa ng maling ang mga hinaing. Young and active leaders sa Kongreso, ang boses natin. Tandaan at iboto, balota 108. Civilian realize the projects we dreamed of. PG Party List, vote 108 na. PG Party List, kasangga mo, balot 108 iboto. PG Party List, boses natin sa Kongreso. PG Party List, kasangga mo, balot 108 iboto. PG Party List, basic good. Atin to, PG Party List, atin to.
Non-stop showbiz update. Magandang araw mga katribu! Narito na ang mga makakasama nyo tuwing umaga sa programang Gising Na. Roy Pelevelo, Atty. Lia Badillo Crisostomo, Vernon Velasco, Kim Sancha at Chert Balagtas. Abangan ang programang Gising Na sa Facebook page ng Daily Tribune.
Ilabas na ang mainit na kape at samahan kami sa inyong pag-almusal, mga katribo.
Simulan natin ang bawat umaga with good vibes sa mga informative and recreational segments ng aming programa.
Maaari niyo rin ibahagi sa amin ang inyong opinion via Daily Tribune Facebook page at Tribune Now sa YouTube.
Makichika na rin sa latest showbiz happenings, mga katribo.
Kaya naman, magsama-sama po tayo sa
Gising Na!